Real Madrid and Barcelona to face European Union investigation. Real Madrid and Barcelona are among 7 Spanish clubs to be investigated over alleged illegal state aid. The Spanish Foreign Ministry announced that the European Commission will also begin proceedings against Osasuna, Athletic Bilbao, Valencia, and Elche. Hercules, who play in the second tier, are also under investigation. The government will fight to defend Spanish clubs because they are also part of the Spanish brand, said Foreign Minister José Manuel García Magallo. The proceedings could take months to conclude and will be officially announced on Wednesday, added Magallo, who denied the clubs had broken EU rules. He said Barcelona, Real Madrid, Osasuna, and Athletic Bilbao are accused of contravening European Union rules because they are still owned by their members and had benefited from favorable tax treatment. The Commission was also probing Real over their training facilities and Bilbao over aid they received for the construction of their new stadium, which opened this season, he added. Valencia, Elche, and Hercules were being investigated because of help the 3 clubs received from the regional government in the form of loans and bank guarantees. Japan sets out defense strategy aimed China tensions. Japan's cabinet has approved a new national security strategy and increased defense spending in a move widely seen as aimed at China. Over the next 5 years, Japan will buy hardware including drones, stealth and aircraft and amphibious vehicles. The military will also build a new marine unit, an amphibious force capable of retaking islands. The move comes with Tokyo embroiled in a bitter row with Beijing over East China Sea islands that both claim. It reflects concern over China's growing assertiveness over its territorial claims and Beijing's mounting defense spending. China's stance toward other countries and military moves, coupled with a lack of transparency regarding its military and national security policies, represent a concern to Japan and the wider international community and require close watch, the national security draft said. Transparent. Japan first increased defense spending in January after a decade of cuts. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was elected a year ago, has called for Japan to broaden the scope of activities performed by its military, something currently tightly controlled by the post-war constitution. He has also established a National Security Council that can oversee key issues. Approving a national security strategy made Japan's foreign and security policy clear and transparent for both the Japanese people and all the world to see, he said. Spending over the 5 years is expected to amount to 23.97 trillion yen. That is equal to 232 billion US dollars and 142 billion pounds, a rise of 2.6%. 1 billion of yen in cost savings are taken into account. Japan plans to buy two anti-missile destroyers, 5 submarines, 52 amphibious vehicles, 3 surveillance drones, 28 F-35 fighter planes, and 17 Boeing Osprey aircraft capable of vertical takeoff. America currently guarantees Japan's defense with a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier and 50,000 troops stationed there. U.S. caution: the announcement of more Japanese military spending comes weeks after China established an Air Defense Identification Zone (ADIZ) over a swath of East China Sea, including islands controlled by Japan. It says all aircraft transiting the zone must obey certain rules, such as fueling fighting planes or face measures. Japan, US, and South Korea, which claims a rock that lies within China's declared zone, have strongly criticized the move, with the US calling it an attempt to unilaterally change the status quo in the region. In its latest expression of concern, the US has warned China against establishing another ADIZ over the South China Sea. Speaking at a new conference in the Philippines, Secretary of State John Kerry said that the East China Sea Zone should not be implemented, and China should refrain from taking similar unilateral actions elsewhere in the region, and in particular over the South China Sea. China had already criticized the outlines of Japan's defense policy and says it is closely watching Japan's security strategy and policy direction. Japan's unreasonable criticism of China's normal maritime activities and its hyping up of the China threat as hidden political motives. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Lai said, Japan ranks 5th in the world of military spending, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, while China is in second place behind the United States. Mr. Abe's government says the strategy is a measured and logical response to a real and increasing threat, reports the BBC's Rupert Winfield Hayes in Tokyo. But many on the left in Japan think Mr. Abe is using the threat from China to pursue his own nationalist dreams. Our correspondent adds, Barcelona and Manchester City to meet. Manchester City was matched against Barcelona on Monday in a draw for the knockout round of the UEFA Champions League, with the first leg in England in February and the return game in Spain in March. It should be a beautiful game, said Manuel Pellegrini, the Chilean coach who was appointed to City last summer. Pellegrini's name was linked a year ago with Barcelona because that word "beautiful" is very close to his philosophy. For Barcelona, the ball must flow. For Pellegrini, the ball must flow. The way both teams go at it, with attack favored over defense, should mean goals at both ends. For Ferran Soriano and Txiki Begiristain, two former Barcelona officials recruited to shape Manchester City on and off the field, the intrigue runs deep. They recruited Pellegrini and the players on behalf of City's Middle Eastern owners, and Begiristain, who played on Barcelona's left wing from 1988 to 1995 and is now City's director of soccer, said at a draw in Lyon, Switzerland. "It will be very tough, but I'm very confident because Pellegrini knows Barcelona perfectly. It's true, it could be better, but if you want to win the Champions League, you have to beat the biggest ones, and Barcelona is one of the biggest." The team's two Argentine stars, City's Sergio Aguero and Barcelona's Lionel Messi, are injured, but each should be recovered and well rested by February. The draw produced a similar sensation of the familiar for other teams. Health permitting, Galatasaray's Didier Drogba will return to Stamford Bridge, where he led Chelsea's attack for 8 years, to face one of his former coaches there, Jose Mourinho. 2 seasons ago, Drogba scored the tying goal for Chelsea against Bayern Munich in the final of his tournament, and then scored the penalty kick to win the cup in his last game for Chelsea. After a brief side trip into Chinese soccer, he moved to Turkey. He has been joined there by Wesley Sneijder, who in 2010 had helped Inter Milan, then coached by Mourinho, win the 2010 Champions League final. They too will meet again, and this is the pattern of the tournament. Because so few clubs can afford to be real contenders, and because players and managers move on, whether they win or lose, their paths are certain to cross. Bayern Munich overcame its losses to Drogba's Chelsea and Sneijder's Inter to win the trophy last May. Along the way, it met Arsenal. Bayern won handsomely in London, but with qualification assured for the German team and impossible for Arsenal, it lost the return leg in Munich. The clubs were drawn as adversaries on Monday. Bayern is the favorite to win again, but nobody rules out Arsenal at any time against any foe. The other matchups drawn Monday were Olympiacos versus Manchester United, AC Milan versus Atletico Madrid, Bayern Leverkusen versus Paris Saint-Germain, Schalke versus Real Madrid, and Zenit St. Petersburg versus Borussia Dortmund. And I want to repeat the one of this paragraph I've already read before. It's because so few clubs can afford to be real contenders, and because players and managers move on whether they win or lose, their paths are certain to cross. It's Real not Real, I'm sorry. But the team's name is Real Madrid, that's for sure. A political deal in a deeply divided Tunisia as Islamists agreed to yield power. Tunis' compromise has been in short supply since Tunisia sparked the Arab Spring nearly 3 years ago, but this small North African nation has once again broken new ground with a political deal between longtime enemies among the Islamists and the secular Old Guard. The deal, announced over the weekend, aims to put in place an independent caretaker government until new elections next year, marking the first time Islamists have agreed in the face of rising public anger to step back from power gained at the ballot box. Tunisia has been clinging toward chaos and political paralysis after two assass assassinations this year and an inability to finalize a new constitution, and it remains fragile and divided. But months of laborious laborious backroom haggling led by two political leaders helped, at least for now, to avoid the kind of zero-sum politics that have some to define the post-Arab Spring tumult in Egypt, Libya, and the battlefield of Syria. Beji Caid Essebsi, a former prime minister who leads a new secular-minded political party, Nidat Tunis, and Rachid Ghannouchi, the leader of the Islamist party Ennahda, have starkly different versions of the country's future. But since Tunisia's political crisis flourished this year, the two men have met one-on-one at least 5 times to try to find a political solution. It has not been easy for either side, and in an indication of just how deep the divisions remain, the two could still not agree on a candidate to serve as interim prime minister when a deal was announced late Saturday between Ennahda and about half of the liberal parties in the opposition. Mehdi Jomah, 50, the industry minister, was chosen as interim prime minister, but Mr. Essebsi did not sign on and could conceivably block cabinet picks. Still, Ennahda was motivated to find a deal that would allow it to move forward with the framework the two men had worked out. Looking over its shoulder at the fall of President Mohamed Morsi in Egypt, and the crackdown on members of his Muslim Brotherhood that followed, the party was fearful of suffering the same fate. Yet it also refused to be hustled from power, insisting that it complete its mandate to draft a new constitution and electoral law, and that the change of power occur through elections. There began 5 months of demonstrations and political mudslinging as the economy worsened and terrorist violence increased. This tense political situation is conducive to terrorism, Mr. Ghannouchi, a renowned religious scholar, said in an interview before the deal. It was in his heated atmosphere that Mr. Essebsi threw down the gauntlet in a television interview and called on Mr. Ghannouchi to meet him and talk. I said, "You are responsible for that," meaning the crisis that had gripped the country. "You have to be part of the solution. I invite you to do so." Doing so was not an easy thing, and it may yet cost each man politically. Their history is long, tangled, and contentious. Mr. Essebsi now says the selection of Mr. Joma is an effort by Ennahda to retain influence. Mr. Ghannouchi was imprisoned twice while Mr. Essebsi served as foreign minister during the dictatorship. Forcing him into exile for 22 years in England. Educated at Zaytuna University in Tunisia and universities in Cairo and Damascus, Mr. Ghannouchi founded the Islamic Tendency movement in 1981. He returns to Tunisia only after the fall of the dictator Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali in 2011. Mr. Essebsi, on the other hand, represents the old political class, born in 1926 into a prominent family. He trained as a lawyer when Tunisia was a French colony and served as Interior, Defense and Foreign Minister after Tunisia independence in 1956. He also held posts as an ambassador to France and Germany and as parliamentary deputy, but he left public service in 1994 during the dictatorship and was considered sufficiently untainted to run the transitional administration for a year after the 2011 upswing. It was Mr. Essebsi's even hand as traditional prime minister, overseeing Tunisia's first democratic multi-party elections that allowed the Islamists under Ennahda to sweep the power in October 2011. Yet within 18 months, Mr. Essebsi began railing against what he saw as Ennahda's incompetence at governing and its laxity toward the incipient terrorism inside Tunisia. He then formed his party, Nida Tounes, which has quickly won the support of a broad section of the traditional political elite, including former members of the government. Though poles apart, Mr. Essebsi and Mr. Ghannouchi came together after two political assassinations and mounting terrorism threatened to roll back Tunisia's tentative democratic progress. The first assassination of a leading liberal politician, Chokri Beled, in February, ended the political honeymoon for Ennahda. Many who had voted for a party already disappointed with its inability to govern now viewed what some saw as its softness toward Islamist extremist groups as giving license to the violence. With the second assassination of the Popular Front leader Mohamed Brahmi on July 25th, the anger against the Islamists swelled into a political crisis. Opposition parties demonstrated for months outside the parliament buildings, calling for government resignation. Politicians withdrew from the National Constituent Assembly, which is writing a new constitution, forcing its suspension. There was a social rejection of Ennahda, said Alaya Alani, a professor of modern history at Manouba University in Tunisia. There was a rejection of the Islamist agenda. After Mr. Essebsi's initial invitations to a dialogue, it took Mr. Ghannouchi 10 or 12 days to respond, but finally he telephoned and agreed to meet. When Mr. Essebsi told him he had engagements outside the country, Mr. Ghannouchi followed him to Paris. He had the courage to say, "I will come and see you abroad." Mr. Essebsi recalled in an interview. He was well received, of course. We talked for 3 hours and I think we created a new climate. Mr. Ghannouchi is more circumspect about the importance of his meeting with Mr. Essebsi. His comment after the first meeting was that Mr. Essebsi was set on becoming president. Labor union leaders who have mediated rounds of cross-party talks since have been equally important in plotting a way forward, Mr. Ghannouchi said. Yet the image of the two doyens of Tunisian politics sitting together drastically eased the tension in the country. Mr. Essebsi won some immediate concessions. Mr. Ghannouchi agreed to drop from the constitution the age limit of 75 for holders of political office, which cleared the way for Mr. Essebsi to run for president. Ennahda also withdrew a draft law to prevent former members of the Ben Ali government from holding office, a concession that angered many inside the party who feared a return of the old guard that suppressed the Islamists. Mr. Essebsi maintains that he threw the Islamists a lifeline by persuading them to relinquish power in favor of an independent caretaker government backed by all parties. The step, he insists, ensured that the Islamists will have a permanent place in Tunisian politics and prevented them from being outlawed, as the Muslim Brotherhood has been in Egypt. I consider that Ennahda is a reality on the political scene, Mr. Essebsi said in an interview at his party headquarters. Newly adorned with the Nida tunnels and emblem of a red palm tree, I reproach it for dominating everything, but I also recognize that it exists, and if we are to hold new elections, it will certainly have a result in those elections. So if I am a Democrat, I have to work with that. It is not the opinion of all, but this is my opinion, he added. Mr. Essebsi was criticized by members of the opposition who fundamentally mistrust the Islamist vision for religious state. Others explained it as a tactic to let Ennahda save face.